Welcome to week 2 of Public Service Consulting Practicum. This week we are reading chapter 5 in the textbook. You should have already met with your client and asked them the questions from chapter 3. This week we will use the answers to these questions to write a draft consulting proposal. This draft proposal will be given to your client and turned in for homework this week. On Tuesday, we will have our first phone calls together. Call me at 760-608-1601 at the time selected last week. Otherwise, you may also email or text me the number you would like me to call you at. Please be sure to text or email me if you cannot make the selected time. Now let's take a couple of minutes and talk about Chapter 5 of the textbook. Chapter 5 is about the second C, which is clarify. The process described in this stage of the 7 C's model follows the pattern of 9 elements. The 9 elements are situation blindness, diagnosis, phase mapping, shadow dancing, culture, decision makers, system construction, stakeholders, and life cycle risk. Now we will go over each of these 9 elements in more detail. Number 1 is situational blindness. It can often be hard to get to the real issue or heart of the problem because people operate in a semi-delusionary state where they fail to see, understand, or accept what the world is really like. The textbook talks about 5 levels. Level 1 is no problem recognized. Level 2 is problem recognized, but it's not deemed to be important. Level 3 is important, but there are no solutions. Level 4 is solutions are possible, but don't know how or don't want to do it. And then level 5 is a clarity of the situation and willingness to address. So there are 4 techniques for shifting. The first is a hook. The second is push. The third is repetition and playback. And the third is reverse. The textbook talks about each of these in detail, and I would recommend that you be familiar with each of these so that you can actually use them when talking to the client. The second element is diagnosis. This is where you gather information that will help determine the real source of the issue and not just tackle the symptoms. There are 2 methods for diagnosis: inside out and outside in. There's 5 sets of data. The first is root, where it's possible to carry out an audit to identify the original source of the problem. In the case of industrial action in a small manufacturing company, it might be changes in pay rates, poor industrial relations, or a change in government policy. The second data is result. What is the true impact of the issue? Is it something that affects the whole organization or one particular group? Or is it something that causes a problem for one product area? Whatever the breakdown, you have to collect firm and valid data that describes the impact of the issue is having. The data must indicate what is really happening rather than what the client or consumer believes is happening. The third kind of data is responsible. Whatever the problem, someone somewhere must have allowed it to happen. This permission might have been given explicitly, the managing director deciding to reduce the organization's cost base by running a re-engineering program. Alternatively, it may have been given implicitly, a parent leaving too many sweets around the house, thus tempting a child. The next is resistance. There is often a temptation to ignore an issue in the hope that it will disappear once the problem has been resolved. However, there can be data elements within this area that might be of interest to you. Consider the resistance that might arise if a company announces plans to change its policy on using company telephones for private calls. The level of such opposition to such a change can indicate a number of important factors, such as the strength of the culture, the extent to which people are prepared to accept centralized decision, and the capability of the people to form coordinated counterattacks to any imposed change. The fifth data is the ripple effect. The first four data areas are visible and can readily be measured and mapped. But any issue, there will be intangible radiation or energy emitting as ripples throughout the organization. This anger and emotion can surround a downsizing exercise or the excitement released by an impending global merger. This radiated energy must be understood, since it will often contain the power to amplify or attenuate the change process associated with any consultancy project. The third element is phase mapping. We have to determine the extent to which known and unknown factors within the change process will affect its potential success. The fourth is shadow dancing. Determine the extent to which unspoken activities and arrangements will affect the situation. Number 5 is culture. Understand the cultural factors that affect the change process. Number 6 is decision makers. Be clear about who actually is making the decisions as opposed to who says they are. The 7th is system construction. Understand the structure of the organizational system and how it is likely to react to any changes. Stakeholders is where you develop a map that indicates who can influence the outcome of the change and to what extent they have the capability and desire to wield their power. And the last one is life cycle risk, to gauge the level of risk associated with the project. All 9 of these elements are part of the second C, clarifying. So that summarizes Chapter 5. Please be sure and read it and answer the discussion forum questions that we posted.